Welcome to Rev Reads. This video is brought to you by Low Anthropology by David Zoll. If you have trouble admitting your mistakes, confessing your errors, telling other people that you were wrong, read Low Anthropology by David Zoll. Also, if you have a hard time forgiving other people when they do wrongs to you, you should read Low Anthropology by David Zoll. I'm reading it right now, and if I wasn't reading this book, I don't know if I would have the courage to confess my mistake in this video. So here's my problem. I had just reviewed The Extent of the Atonement by David Allen. Big deal to me that I reviewed this book because I read hundreds of pages to review this. And one of the things I put in the review is that one thing I would have liked to have had in the book was a glossary of terms. And so I share my review, I put it out there, and then on Twitter, someone responds to my review. Sean, what words were we missing in the glossary of terms in the book? And I was like, oh, no, I didn't know there was a glossary of terms at all. Because there were multiple times while I was reading the book, I'm looking at the table of contents, I'm going and looking in the back of the books and skimming through all those sections in the back, and I don't see any glossary of terms. So I'm looking some things up online to get the terms. But then after being keyed into this by someone on Twitter, I'm like, oh, there probably was one and I missed it. And sure enough, I look through the introduction, and there in the introduction is a glossary of terms that is about 3 pages long. It's a whole bunch of terms. Now, I would add a couple more on there because there were a couple of times where someone gave their sort of own view of the atonement, and then that person's name was attached to their view of atonement for a few generations, and none of those individuals are on here. And so there were a few individuals' names and their views of the atonement that I might have included on here as a short little synopsis for when somebody's view of the atonement is stated, but you don't have the view described in that section. So there's a couple of people I'd probably add in here, but overall, really good glossary of terms. I missed it. Why? And here's my confession. I read a lot of books. I get a lot of recommendations to read a lot of books from viewers, from publishers, even, and publications, and I want to read them all, but it's hard to keep up. So one of the things that I've started doing over the last probably 6 months or so is I start reading books on page 1. So if you got those Roman numeral pages at the beginning of a book, I'm sorry, but I'm not going to read those. I'm starting on page 1. I got a lot of books to read. And the big introduction to Allen's book is all in Roman numerals. It is not page 1. But after going through the introduction, after seeing that message on Twitter last night, I realized, yeah, I should have read this introduction. It would have been helpful. There were some good stuff in the introduction, but I didn't read it because I start at page 1. So if you ever look at me checking off all these books that I'm reading, and if you want to be able to think something about me and being like, he's a fraud, well, one thing you can know I'm a fraud is I'm not reading the Roman numeral pages at the beginning of a book. I'm starting at page 1. So if you want your introduction to be read by me, it better be page 1 of the book, or I'm probably just going to skip right past it. So I didn't read the introduction of The Extent of the Atonement. I missed the glossary of terms. So in my review, when I say there is no glossary of terms, there actually is one. And there were a couple of terms in that glossary that I actually ended up looking those up online. Wouldn't have needed to if I would have known this was in here. I honestly, and this is sort of a minor critique, just how the book is formatted, I think the glossary of terms is important enough. And you can come to those terms, a while after you've read through the introduction because of how long the book is. I would have made the glossary of terms sort of its own section with its own couple of page numbers in the table of contents, so that if I wanted to refer back to that, I would have had that in the table of contents. That's sort of my one minor critique about that. But overall, the fault's on me. I confess I did not read the introduction. So when I said I wish there was a glossary of terms, The Extent of the Atonement, there was one. I just missed it, and so I didn't read it. So apologies to Dr. Allen and the people who put that book together, that I critiqued something in their book that I wished was there, and it was actually there. It was my bad that I did not read the introductions, and now I'm confessing to everybody on here my faults. And I don't know why, but I feel like this is exceedingly embarrassing that I'm confessing that I start reading books at page 1 and I don't read the Roman numerals. And maybe I'll need to start that now. But a part of me is just like, you know what? I don't do this and I don't follow through on that specific thing, but that's okay because, like David Zoll shows in Low Anthropology, we all are not as perfect as we claim to be online. One of the reasons with this video, when I put it together, I'm going to edit out nothing. So whatever mistakes and foibles I have in the way that I'm speaking, they're just there. And when it took me a second to turn the page and Extended the Atonement, you get to watch that too. So again, Extended the Atonement is a great book. I really recommend it. There is a glossary of terms in it. Watch the full review to learn more about what I think about the Extended the Atonement if you have not watched that yet. And again, I hope this will encourage more people who watch this video to watch the review of this video, because 2/3 of the way into Low Anthropology, excuse me, 1/3 of the way into Low Anthropology, this is already a really excellent book by David Zoll, and I am really enjoying it. And I think that it has already sort of impacted me in a willingness to say to people, I messed this up. I didn't do right. I'm sorry. And then if other people come up to me with their things that they mess up, I think it'll be a little bit easier for me to be like, yeah, I'm okay with you messing up, because you know what? I mess up too. My shirt says Louisiana Running and Walking Company on it, and I haven't run since October because I broke my ankle. So we're not all perfect. But I hope that you will read both of these books, The Extended the Atonement, Low Anthropology. I hope that you'll learn a lot from them. And I'm sorry for my mistake in the initial review. And I hope that I can maybe do some of these videos more often, that if somebody brings something to my attention that I did wrong, that I misspoke on, I took something out of context, that I can come and let you know what I did wrong, because my assumption is I'm not a perfect book reviewer. And there's going to be times that I'm going to review books and saw them as great, but miss something, and that would make the book not great at all. Or I saw a book as very lacking in something, and it turned out it had that, and I missed it. And so if you notice something in my reviews that are really not on point and really off in the way that the review is, let me know. Maybe I can look at it, take a double check at that book, but hopefully I'll have a willingness to be more gracious and more humble in my willingness to confess my faults, even in my reviews. But I want to continue to do this. I love these reviews. I think this makes me a better book reader by putting these out. I appreciate all the support that I've gotten on this channel, especially the Buy Me a Coffee people who support financially the expenses I spend on this channel. I love all of you. I'm blown away that people want to financially support me reviewing books. I think that's just, it's amazing. To the authors, publishers who send me free books like this, I mean, that's amazing, and I love that too. And so just thank you to everybody who's been around for the channel, and I hope that as we go farther, I can do things that will give you more confidence in what I'm doing. And maybe one of the reasons if you'll have more confidence in me is if I'm just honest about how I feel about things. I've tried to be honest the whole time and tell you forthright how I feel about books, and hopefully even when I make mistakes and come back and look at something in hindsight, I can tell you about those mistakes there. So I hope that you have a wonderful and blessed day today. Next week, we'll be reviewing When Faith Sees Christ, a book by C.I. Scofield. So grew up with the Scofield Reference Bible. Never read a Scofield book until now. Short little book. And I made up for this one's shortness by also reviewing the book Should Christians Fear the Outer Darkness, which is a long, thick book. And so we'll be reviewing those two next week, both from Grace Gospel Press. And so, but thanks for putting up with my confession. And I hope that you find it maybe somewhat humorous, and it helps you with your decision on whether or not to read through Extended the Atonement, because the glossary of terms is there.